Chair.
I call Brett Hudson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's a pleasure to rise and speak on this bill, particularly a bill that has very broad support across the House, although we might disagree on some perspectives. And it's been well canvassed, of course, that this is all about New Zealand meeting its oil stockholding treaty obligations. I think a very positive sign on it, and I'll come to what Mr. Tabato had to say about how it might be paid for, but I think the fundamental change here that's very important is that not only does it bring about a more sustainable way of funding our obligation, it's actually a far fairer way, because it's actually setting the cost of that obligation against the users of the product, of the fuels. If you take the current way we've done it for some time under general taxation, and I take to a point that Mr. Hughes raised earlier, is you've got people riding on electric trains or electric buses, or who are using shared transport like a bus. So their actual consumption of these fuels is much lower, but because it's through general taxation, they're actually being taxed to pay for it disproportionately. So making it a user pays thing on fuel is a very sensible way of doing it. And because it's a 90-day stockpile, it's very much, the stockpile in this case, not a physical stockpile, but the virtual stockpile is based on your actual consumption needs. So by tying it to the litres that are consumed, we're actually matching our expenditure on the 90-day stockpiling with our actual consumption. And that changes over time. I mean, you only need to look at the gas guzzlers in the 1970s and compare them to the nippy little fuel-efficient cars of today to know these things change over time. And I tell you what, I'm unfortunate enough that I can remember the gas guzzlers in the 1970s, like the Mark III Zephyrs and the Mark III Cortinas, the little Escorts that didn't take too much, but they were nowhere near as efficient as the modern cars of today. So I think it's a very, very good thing that we're moving to a per litre based charge. But before I'd like to cover now this part that Mr. Tabato raised about who should pay for that. Because obviously, if you look about pretty much anything else that's consumed, the consumer pays for what they consume. But New Zealand First seem to be saying that they think it's the producer that should pay for the thing that you're going to consume. So it's a very interesting 1970s way of approaching the problem. But in itself it would have some inherent unfairness, because not all oil companies in New Zealand, not all retailers are the same. They don't all produce or import the same amount of fuels into New Zealand. They certainly don't all sell the same. So the only way the New Zealand First model could actually work is if they regulated precisely how many litres of what type of fuel each of the oil companies and or retailers could actually sell. This is really going back to the days of the very visible hand of government, where you think you can control the entire economy. You certainly cannot. Putting a small levy against those who consume the fuels is definitely the right way to go. But thank you, Mr. Nash, because I would like to speak to the point that you raised. To change that part in Part 1, Section 4, Section 14 amended 14.3, to change that word may to must would serve no practical purpose other than to constrain governments current and into the future. If it is a must, then any levy collected over any time can only be applied without further legislative amendment to that specific purpose. Now, you only need to look at the point of where we are today, and you only need to look at what has happened in the market for oil and petrol at the pump over the last recent months to know that it can be quite a volatile thing. So we could have a situation, Mr. Nash, where we could accumulate quite a bit of levy that we're not actually having to consume in total, and it sits here in account doing nothing. That's not really the best use of an accumulation of government funds, but what the word may means is that it can be applied to that very purpose, which is exactly what we want. Changing it to must would achieve nothing except to place an unnecessary constraint upon government. The other point I'd like to just touch upon briefly, because it was raised again by Mr. Tabato, is the regulations which can be made by order in council. And quite frankly, so we have a system here, and I mean, these fuels are going to remain a part of our landscape, our drivescape for many, many years to come. It makes complete sense that we don't want to be tinkering with legislation every 12 months or so. By permitting certain regulations to be made by order in council, it means that we can As a government of the day, I hope it remains us. We're certainly working very hard and will continue working very hard, Mr Chair,
Brett Hudson.
to continue with that, but it allows the government of the day to make changes to the levy, the rate of the levy, or the formula for the levy in a way that best suits the nature of the consumption of the day, the usage of the day, the requirements of the day. It makes absolute sense. As in fact do I think the provisions across Part 1. And having said the part that I wanted to say, I will stop there and allow other members to speak on the other part. I know you're excited, Mr Galloway.
Point of order, Jami-Lee.
Mr Chair, I seek leave for the Gambling Amendment Bill number 2 to be taken as one question.
Leave has actually been approved when we last debated this bill, and so there's actually no need to do it again. So the point's been made.
Carmel is more efficient than I realised.
I'm
Mr. Chairman?
keen to hear Dr. Megan Woods.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm very keen to speak.